Why yes, you are not mistaken. I am indeed doing the first deck profile of set 4 on Magnolia. Not Bavsargra, not Seraph Snow. I don't know why or how myself either. Hello gamers, welcome. Today we have a nice little video today. We're gonna have a deck profile on Magnolia Elder. So I'm sure you're thinking, bruh, you were talking about Bavsargra this, Bavsargra that, pure light this, pure light that, these whole months when you were hyping up set 4. What happened? What are you talking about Magnolia first? Well, I'm gonna be real with you. Magnolia was one of my least favorite ride lines for the longest time, all the way until set 4. And in set 4, at first they revealed, of course, Magnolia Elder, and I was like, oh, this is an interesting grade 4, but I was like, it's probably the most boring grade 4 so far. I'm being serious. I really thought it was one of the most boring grade 4s of the ones they revealed and like at the start. But then when I saw how the deck is played and I saw how important this little guy was and how you could loop your resources and plus from just recycling all your cards and like do all these cool little combos, I was like, I like this deck. This is a cool little deck. So this was the first deck that I really started testing with after Bavsargra. I think Bavsargra is still the deck I have the most games with in total. But I took this to locals. I placed third, only losing to Gravidia, which is like, it's a good matchup, but I didn't open any inlet pulses one game, and another game I didn't draw Elder, which is the big weakness of the deck. But today we're gonna talk about it. Talk about Miss Magnolia, or Mr. Magnolia, sorry. I always call her a Miss, but it's a Mr. I apologize. Anyway, let's get into it. We're gonna talk about the deck as usual, and then go into all of the little gameplay examples and whatnot, and then discuss like combos and little interactions you should know. So for the ride line, I am playing Zorgnolia. So of course we have the starter, we have the Ranker Chain, we have the Black Tears Husk, as well as Magnolia. So let's break it down, right? Starter can be anything you want as long as it's Soikea. Don't play a Dragon Empire starter, that's not allowed. Ranker Chain is a grade 1 that says when it's on Vanguard Circle once per turn, you can Sobas 1, draw 2, and then discard an order card. But if you didn't discard an order card, then you have to discard 2. So we do have to play some orders in the main deck, that's true, and we play a series of them. And of course, if you call it out, if you revive it after soul blasting it, you can also make him a 10k booster when you play an order during a turn, so that's also good. And then of course, because we discard an order for Ranker Chain, we write into Black Tears Husk Dragon, which then gets us that order back to hand, so we don't actually lose out on cards. So basically just +2 from the grade 1, which is very nice. I think this is one of the best ride lines in general for that kind of like early plussing engine. And then of course our main grade 3 for the ride line is Magnolia. So Magnolia's skill is end of the battle that she attacked, count lost 1, and then choose one of your rears, and until end of turn you can attack from the back row and gets +5k. And if you Persona Road, then you can choose 3 rears. But I don't play Persona Rides in this. I'm a full-on Elder. I know you can like, this list is really cool because Magnolia, you can virtually build this deck any way you want. People play it with Elder and the Persona Rides. Some people play it with freaking Flagberg ride line. Like, people play this with so many different tech options. Some people run like the grade 2 that pops itself to get something 10k. There's so many different ways to build this deck, but I think that the build I have is the most like kind of lean one. I think it's also more or less the same as the one I presented in my all decks video, but I want to give the extra like added commentary and detail to the deck as I usually do in these deck profiles. So even if they bomb and the algorithm kills me, I will still do them because I really like talking about this game. I think this format, set 4, is the best format Overdress has ever had. It is so exciting and so fun to play, and I want to talk about it. Okay, so getting into it, we have Magnolia Elder as our 4-up. So this is the grade 4 for the deck. As all grade 4s, she possesses the triple drive ability, you can see right here, and no Persona Ride icon, so keep that in mind. And when you ride her, you choose a card from your soul and call it. So our optimal call target is Inlet Pulse, which is the grade 3 we're going to take a look at after this, and we want to basically re-ride this every turn if possible in order to call those Inlet Pulses from the soul. And her other skill is, if you have one or more Magnolias in your soul or your rearguard circle, all your rearguards can attack and intercept from the back row and get +5k. So she literally gives the Magnolia grade 3 effect to everything for free, which is really huge because by not running Persona Rides and not relying on the original Magnolia, I only use her skill once on turn 3, right, to get the 4 attacks. But after that, you ride into this and you don't use counterblast for the multi-attacks anymore. Plus, keep in mind this power buff is on both players' turns. It also works on your opponent's turn, so if they swing into your rears, keep that in mind. And it also lets them intercept from the back row, right? It doesn't give the +5k shield, unfortunately. It would be a little bit too good, but I think that this deck is like one of the best decks in the current format because of the fact that all these attacks are free free. Like, all of this intercept and extra power is free, and it's just so good. The deck functions on its own really, really well, and she makes everything work. But because the deck relies on Magnolia Elder so much, that's also the weakness. If you don't draw into her at least once and just sit on her, you're going to be in danger, right? The other weakness is that she herself is a 13k. She doesn't get buffed by anything because usually the thing behind her is attacking, and you don't have Persona Ride in this deck either. So she's swinging for 13. The triple drive is cool, but it's not going to stop them from tutor passing, right? Unless you check a front on the first check, you're not going to be investing power in the Vanguard either, because you'd rather give it to your Gynosla that's going to be passing the power around anyway, right? So that's basically the main grade 3. No, main grade 4, sorry, main grade 4. The main grade 3 isn't one that we ride. It is our good friend Inlet Pulse Dragon. So this is the ultimate staple of Stoicheia. It's also going to be played in the freaking new Roroa ride line as well, and it's also, of course, a staple in Flagberg. So it was built for Flagberg, right? This card, the first effect requires you to have a Vanguard that is Flagberg, but ignore that. The second skill says at the end of your turn, if you attacked 4 more times in this turn, put into soul and draw a card. So as I said before, let's say, like, best case scenario, you call 3 of these, right? You call 2 to the front, 1 to the back, and use grade 3 Magnolia skill to let the fourth, the one in the back attack. So you get 4 attacks, all 3 go to soul, you draw 3, next turn ride Magnolia Elder, call one of them out. Like, it speaks for itself. It speaks for itself. This card is so nuts. Like, being able to provide soul for all your soul blast abilities and also provide the freaking just ability to draw cards every turn like that. Like, you pass on like 8+ card hands every turn. Like, you can farm up a hand, defend against whatever offensive your opponent has, and then just do the same thing again next turn, right? It's so good. Flagberg, like, not Flagberg, Inlet Pulse is probably the best card Stoicheia has ever had printed, together with the next one we're going to take a look at. But this card is just insane. It's so good. It's going to be good in every Stoicheia ride line, except for Zorga for now, until Zorga gets a 4th attack. And when it does, it's going to be important for Zorga too. So keep that in mind. And now the kind of sad part of this deck is that it kind of requires a promo. It kind of requires a promo that just released, and it's not as expensive as the promo of that promo pack, but it's still the second most pricey, which of course is our friend NPix, and we do play this as a 4 of. Now, if you can't get NPixes, there are some other cards you can play. You can play the grade 1 from the last set that goes to soul and countercharges if you've attacked enough times in a turn, or you can play more copies of another grade 2 we'll take a look at later, but nothing replaces NPix. Nothing does what NPix does, because NPix still is so simple, right? It's back row rearguard circle, he gets plus 10k power, so he's already a 23k attacker on any Magnolia, and he also keeps that power in the opponent's turn too. And if you have 3 or less rearguards, all of your rearguards in the same column as this unit cannot be chosen by opponent's card effects. So this is huge, because this means Gravidia doesn't pop those rears. This means Eugene passes. Like, so many decks that rely on like selective popping can't do it. One deck that can is Bavsargra. Bavsargra can still wipe out the front row regardless because it doesn't target, but this card will win you matchups that were otherwise very rough. Like, the Gravidia matchup normally would be very rough if it wasn't for NPix, and that's why it's so important, because you can make 2 NPixes in the back rows, put 2 things in front, and then they can't be targeted, right? Like, the Gravidia matchup in particular, like, you put 2 NPixes in the back and then it was something in front of one of them, so you only have 3 rears, your field can't be targeted, literally can't be targeted. So that's why it's so nice to have like NPix, something in the front, and then 2 inlet pulses, because the inlet pulses will go to the soul, and then you pass on 3 rears, so you have this resist effect still active. So NPix is really good. The price should keep dropping as more and more people get their promo packs, and the nice thing is that those promo packs come in like bundles of 8, and of course if you get all 8, that means you get 1 of each promo in them, and then 2 of them will be foil, and 1 of the foils will be either NPix or the Macarite. So that is a very good part of it. So NPix is amazing. It's a very good card. You can replace it, but it won't do the same thing that it does, right? If you plan to play super competitively and you plan to take this deck to Springfest, I think, and it's gonna be a great pick for Springfest, I think you're gonna need NPix. You're gonna need NPix, and it's gonna be very important. But getting away from expensive promos, we go back to a very iconic card from set 1, which is the Gynosla. So Gynosla made a nice comeback, because this card fell off because, you know, it costs counterblast, right? And Magnolia was burning a lot of counterblast before, but it doesn't now, which is nice. So we can play Gnosla again. It says in the back row rearguard circle, when it attacks, counterblast 1, choose another rearguard and give it this unit's power. So if this attacks with just 15, if you didn't give it any triggers, it passes 15 to the other unit. If you put an OT on it, it passes the OT. If you put 2 triggers on it and it's like 35, then it passes the 35 to another unit, which is a huge amount of power. So Gnosla is just very usable in this deck, and like you have to really think about which, like, how much damage is your opponent on, what's in their hand, how many Gnoslas you want to commit, because if you commit 2, that's 2 CB, but if they don't get popped, that means next turn you can use that again, and then your CB starts burning through because you don't have any counter charge in this deck, right? No counter charge that you're actually running because you don't really need it. Like, you're very frugal with your CB and like usually just use like 1 Gnosla per turn and stuff like that, if any, right? Sometimes you just go for just a bunch of inlet pulses and nothing else. So Gnosla is a very important card, and we can use it again as a 4 of because of the fact that it's just, you know, it's a generic CB. Moving on, we have one of the new cards of set 4 that really supports this deck as well in the Pantero. So Pantero is a really nice kind of like the future of Magnolia card for me, because there's 2 things that kind of like denote the future of it to me, right? The first things is the first effect being generic, of course, you know, Soul Blast 1 when you call it to call another Pantero from your drop. So you can guard with these early and then just revive 1 or call 1 from hand to like revive a bunch, like fill up a board of them. But the thing is that when he attacks from anywhere, right? Normally they make these effects say when it attacks from the back row. This can attack from the front row as long as you have a Magnolia Vanguard and still get the plus 5k. So with Magnolia Elder's power boost is going to be swinging for 19, so you're always asking for that awkward 10k shield from your opponent if you didn't put a front on it or Gnosla on it or things like that, right? Pantero is just really good. I like this card a lot. Like, you don't really run out of soul in this deck either because you keep getting it back with Inlet Pulse, so if anything, Soul Blasting out the Inlet Pulse and reviving it is also pretty good. Just keep in mind, every single time you call this card from the drop after calling it once, you have to keep paying the Soul Blast to keep calling more copies. So make sure to stop when you've Soul Blasted enough and don't go overboard if you have better cards to call down from your hand too. This is the card you can play more copies if you don't have NPixes, in my opinion, which is the one of Gabreg. I know some people like to play 2 because he is kind of a finisher. His wording might be a little bit confusing to some, but basically what he says is when your other unit in this column attacks, so let's say he's in the front and you have an NPix behind him, right? When that NPix attacks, then his effect procs to Soul Blast 1 and he gets the plus 10k, and then you choose all of your opponent's rears, and your opponent cannot guard with the grade of those rears when this guy attacks, not when that other rear, but when this rear attacks. So he is a very good card because in the late game, especially against stuff like Bavsargra or like Nirvana, if they keep a Trickstar up, you also give them a grade 0 restrict, right? So they have to be very careful with what they call, because you can just have him as a 1-of, have him in drop, revive him later on with one of your orders, and that's the job done. That's the job done. Gabreg has done what he came to do, and that's all she wrote, right? So I think this card honestly is just, it's a nice finisher, but you don't really need it too many, and you're not going to use it much in the early game. Like sometimes in the early game I call him down just to bash and like push early because I know I'll revive him later on, because his guarded trick isn't good until your point's at like 5 or something. One thing you can never forget from any deck build, of course, is the PGs. So Planar Prevent Dragon is our main PG for Stoicheia. It's good, make sure you have it. I know they're going up in price lately, but I think Stoicheia ones are still okay in price, so I do recommend playing them in, you know, over the ones in the start deck, obviously. Now for the orders, this is where I think people definitely like can get pretty, you can explore different options. There's a lot of different things you can do because of the fact that you're playing the Zorga ride line. I play 2 copies of Wild Intelligence, but I'm really debating of putting it up to 3. It's because I play a 1-of order that we'll take a look at next, but Wild Intelligence is amazing because in any turn it's a counterblast 1, mill 3, revive 1. So this will just pop out your Inlet Pulse, for example, just like that, very easily. But, you know, keep in mind it calls cards that are the same or lower grade than your Vanguard. So you can't call Inlet Pulse on turn 2, gotta wait for turn 3. But speaking of turn 3, that's the best time to use this card, because if you are on the grade 3 Magnolia, you can counterblast 1 and call 2. So you can discard 2 Inlet Pulses at the start of the game and then use this on turn 3 to call 2 Inlet Pulses from your drop, which is very cool. So we like that a lot. That's the main reason why I played 2 of it, is because on turn 3 it's amazing. After that it's a CB1 to revive 1, right? Which is fine, but we also have, you know, Soul Blast 1, revive 1, and give it 5k in the Spiritual Body Condensation, which you can also play as a 3 of and cut the next order I have. I play 5 orders, but you can also play 6 if you want to. Spiritual Body Condensation is it's a monster reborn, right? Soul Blast 1, revive something from your drop that is a grade that is the same or lower than your Vanguard and give it plus 5k. So if you revive something like a Gnosla, that's gonna pass more power. If you revive an Inlet Pulse, it gets over defensives, right? right? So we like that quite a lot. And of course, the last order I play is the one of the Regurgitation. This comes in handy because you have good call targets all across the board, right? Against Bastion, pop a grade 3, call Inlet Pulse. Against anything with grade 2s in the front, you can call like your Gynoslas, you can call a Panthero that calls more Pantheros, so you have a lot of nice things to do. And I think the removal is quite nice because people don't expect it, right? When they play against Magnolia, they think like, oh, my whole board is safe, like I don't have to worry about like, you know, this like random card that's not gonna get taken out from the back and like things like that. They feel pretty cool with it. So I think it's a nice surprise to have, but I think if you don't care about that, then either play a third Wild Intelligence or a third Spiritual Body Condensation. There's other orders you can consider too, but I like this lineup of 5. This isn't Zorga where we need to play like 9. I think it's fine to play 5 and you're still going to hit them. Like, keep them in your early mulligan because they're super important for the ride line. But that is the order lineup that I play. I think 5 is a good number. 6 is like the most I would play, but 5 I think is just perfect. I think it's literally just like the icing on the cake kind of ratio there. For triggers, I play 3 fronts, 1 SP because I pulled it and nobody wants to buy it from me, so I guess I'm just playing my SP now. So 3 fronts because defensive, 20k is always cool. Then I play 4 draws. I know some people like to play 5 or 6. Draws are really important in this deck because you need to hit your elders. Like, you just need to hit your elder. Like, you have to draw into the elder and it's really important, or draw into the inlet pulls, or just in general. Like, that's why people play like 6 to 7 draws sometimes, is because they just like, they need to see elder, they need to see their inlet pulls. But if the game goes on for very long and some matchups can definitely drag out, you will start decking out. So be careful. That's why I think 4 is a good number and it feels pretty safe at the same time, so that's why I keep it to 4. Still played 4 crits, of course, the effect crits, because the soul never hurts. Like, it's cool to have the soul from this effect too, and it's a card you can revive sometimes when your drop zone is kind of bad and you just guard it with this because it will provide you a soul and some power to the field. And then 4 heals, of course, nothing too crazy. Heals are good, we don't need to cut them, we're not a crazy aggro deck. And finally, one of the best OTs in my opinion, the Bless Favor. It's an omni trigger, gives you a front, crit, heal, and draws 2, right? So it's a great card. It's going to be very good, especially because we play 4 Gnosla, and you know, that's just already like it speaks for itself. Now let's quickly talk about the ride deck discards. So I'm going to order these in terms of just like what's most profitable in the long term. So first one is obviously Panthero. Panthero is going to be a card that you can revive very easily by just calling any other Panthero. So I like to discard him for the ride deck because he just gives me value very quickly, right? The other card that might be a bit of a surprise is Inlet Pulse. So Inlet Pulse is fine to discard because you can't call him early to rush or anything, and instead you play a lot of revival orders. So you can revive him on turn 3 and get the 4th attack with Magnolia's skill, and then just put him into the soul and bring him back out with Elder, so I think it's quite good. And then of course our kind of finisher we don't need in the early game, so I prefer to discard it in the early and then revive it later on when we need it. And finally Gnosla, we never need too many Gnoslas, and everything in this deck is revivable with the orders, so it's, you know, any card you discard for the ride deck is something you can bring back later on. The only cards you should never discard is like Magnolia Elder, right? Unless you really have like 4 in hand or something, and then that's a different scenario. And for triggers, like draw triggers are fine to discard too, so that's kind of your like priority list of the ride deck discards. All right, so now let's take a look at some mulligan examples. So, you know, just gonna do a mulligan and some early gameplay so you guys get a feel for how the deck wants to function in the early game, and also some of the kind of like combos and priorities you got to take in mind. And let me know in the comments if you guys appreciate this segment of the deck profiles, because it is usually, you know, it adds a bit of time to the whole process, but I'm sure that, you know, in the past people used to always say that they liked this segment because it gave them an insight of how the deck actually works. And I think as standard becomes more and more complex with every set, I think it's still pretty vital to get that kind of like gameplay aspect to the deck as well. So as usual, I'm going to do 2 dice and then we're going to see who goes first. Let's say I am the DP dice and then the grand blue dice are our opponent, so let's see who's going to roll higher. So it's going to be the opponents. We go second, which isn't too bad because we draw more cards. That means we can hit an order earlier even more consistently. So this opening hand, you can see like our main priority is going to be keeping the order, most importantly for the ride line, and the combo parts are fine. Like if you're playing against something like Revidia, you might want to keep the PG, and then Gnoslas are something we can find later on. So we're going to put the remaining 4 back because we really need to draw into Inlet Pulse and Elder. Those are very important, right? So Panthero is a good discard, draw is a good defensive, a heal, and a front. So we have some nice defense options in this hand, but definitely lacking, definitely quite lacking. No Inlet Pulses in the early game. We can't do the triple Inlet Pulse turn 3 shenanigans that, you know, this deck is definitely capable of doing. But let's see what we draw into throughout this game and see how it goes, right? So we're going second, so we're going to draw 1 card into another front, and then we're going to discard the Panthero here for the ride deck and ride into the Rancor Chain. I'm going to use the starter skill first in order to draw an additional card. We get a PG, and then the Rancor Chain's effect will activate. We will Soul Blast 1 here, and then we're going to draw 2 first. Keep in mind you always draw first. first. All right, we get an end pick, so depending on the matchup, that might be pretty big, and we will discard the order, of course, so we don't have to discard more cards. The turn 1 is never an aggressive one. Turn 1 is usually just right swing pass, so we're gonna ride, swing, and get a crit and pass. So that's usually your starting first turn. We get a heal defensive, so it usually is going to shut down the last attack. If we want to be more safe, we can commit a card, but let's say our opponent just doesn't, you know, just finishes their turn there. We usually don't want too much damage early, right? Depending on the matchup, you might even guard the first attack, right, to stay at 0 damage, because you'll notice that we don't play any like early game super offensive cards. Here in this hand, we can discard the draw trigger because we don't really do much with it for the time being, and then ride into the Black Tears Husk Dragon to get back our Spiritual Body Condensation. For the time being, we're really not seeing a lot of our pieces, so we don't want to go too aggressive because we'll need to attack 4 times somehow on the Magnolia turn, or do our best to at least achieve that if we have an Inlet Pulse. So we're going to swing with the Vanguard solo here and get a heal, which is nice. We hit a crit earlier, so let's say we don't heal this one and just add that to our hand. Our opponent's going to probably crit us. We get an Order, followed by an Elder, which definitely hurts. So not seeing the Elder here yet, you're going to have to either kind of like play the long game or try to find one somehow. So we're going to guard last attacks as we went second, so that means our opponent has a greater offensive and we need to actually commit some shield. So getting back to our turn here, we're gonna stand and draw. We draw into the Elder, which is super huge here, but we don't have many pieces. We don't have many like units to attack with, so we're gonna have to basically make something happen with the cards in our drop zone here. So what we can do here is probably discard a trigger. So I'm gonna discard the heal in order to ride into the Magnolia, so that's already a good start. So no Inlet Pulse, no problem, right? We're gonna call down the end picks here to the back row, and then we're going to use the Spiritual Body Condensation to Soul Blast out the Dragon, which we can of course get back later on if we want to. But for now, I'm going to get the Pantero, because Pantero will be a pretty big attacker with 19 now from the Order, which is good. And our opponent's already at grade 3, so it's also an important thing to consider. We don't have any other Panteros on the field or anything, but no problem, right? No problem. You could have also technically Soul Blast the other thing in order to bring back the Dragon when you ride the Elder, but I think it's okay for the time being as we played it here as well. Or actually, if you are playing for that, if you are playing with that in mind, then it might be better to keep this in the soul for now and call it out later on. So let's actually switch that. So here we're going to swing first with the Magnolia and basically just attack 3 times this turn. You optimally want to attack 4 times, like inlets and stuff. Speaking of which, there we go, off the top, and a crit, so we can give that to the Pantero. Then Magnolia's effect will activate. We will Soul Blast the Order here in order to just put that in the drop zone, and then give the 5k and back row attack skill to end pick. So swing for 23, and this is already attacking for 29, so that's very good. We can swing with 23 first, and then 29, and then we pass on the board where our rears here are safe, so we know this part of the board will survive, and then whatever we make from the Elder will stick around as well. So our hand is also pretty good. We have an inlet for next turn, so that's very good. So we're going to take another Elder as damage. Let's say we get crit, so we get pushed to 5. Another inlet gets put away as well. Let's say here we have to guard pretty big, you know, like a crit in the front, and then PG this last attack because our opponent is just a sack god and he's just finding every single piece he wants. So with that, we're now going to ride into the Elder. We see a crit off the top. Ride into Elder. And then, of course, we're going to use a skill to call the Black Tears Husk Dragon that I'm covering, not copying with my camera. There we go. I think that's a bit more straightforward. And so now we can basically just call down this Inlet Pulse to the back row, and it'll go away as well. And so now we can swing with the Elder with the triple drive, which is also very nice. So we get a Gnosil for later, we get another Gnosil for later, and an end pick. So triple normal unit, which means our hand isn't super hot on the defensive side, and we're at 5 damage. Then we didn't play an Order this turn, so this is only 15k. This is coming in with 19 from its own buff, as well as the Elder buff. This is a 23, so we'll leave that for later, and this 18k Inlet Pulse will swing. This is the 4th attack, so this of course will now achieve his own condition, and then coming in with the end picks. So now end of turn, this will go to the soul, and we will draw an extra card into the crit, and now the buff from end picks is also live to protect this side of the field, so it's also very good. So now let's say in order to survive, we have to literally like guard with everything, like guard with all of our triggers, intercept with this, for example, and all that kind of stuff, just so we can do something with this hand, right? So then let's say it's our turn once again, and I'm going to draw another end picks here. So we don't have anything to ride. Optimally, we would ride another Elder and call out the inlet and be able to swing with it again, but we can still put on a pretty strong offensive here by just calling down like double Gnosla and an end picks to the front. It's not going to be as strong as before, but still, you know, double Gnosla will make this turn very strong. So I'm going to swing with the Elder, get a triple drive, a over trigger is going to come out, so that's going to let us draw 2, get the front row buff, give the 100 mil to the Gnosla that can pass it here and then pass it there, and then of course still still have 2 more checks with the PG there. Pretty good. And then of course it's got a front. We have a heal off of the effect too. So even if you have a counterblasted damage, honestly having the inlet pulse in the drop zone might be more worth it. So you can heal that out first, just so you can revive this with an order later on. As you can see, is the only good revive target right now. So you can basically like swing with your 100 million Gnosla, CB, and then pass it to here, swing with this one, and then CB to pass it to those end picks, and then these are going to swing with their big attacks, and then this will also swing as well. So that's just the kind of thing you can do. This was honestly one of the like worst examples of the offensive output that this deck can have. Some of my proudest high rolls definitely include moments like this, where, you know, you just kind of like swing with the Magnolia. I literally did this in the tournament. Swing with Magnolia, give this back row attack skill, attack, 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 and then end of turn, you did 4 attacks. All 3 of them go to the soul, and then you get to draw 3 fresh cards. So it's like, it's pretty good. And then next turn, you ride into the Elder. It calls out one of your inlet pulses. You use your spiritual body to basically call out the other inlet pulse from grave after soul blasting it. And then as long as you can output 4 attacks, then again, the next turn, you're going to put the inlet pulses into the soul and then draw your, 2 more of your cards. And then next turn, just do it again, right? Just ride another Elder, call out the inlet pulse, and then yada, yada, yada. Just, you get the idea. You keep looping inlet pulse as like this infinite resource engine. So ladies and gents, there you have it. This is the OTP of the standard meta right now, the best pair, which is of course inlet pulse and Magnolia Elder. This deck is really nuts. It's really strong. It's really fun to play. It's a huge treat, even if you just want to play it on CFA and play it online just to get a feel for it. I really recommend it. I think my list is a good kind of like first framework. There's definitely some other ideas I want to experiment and a lot of other techs you can play in this deck. So look at all of the topping deck lists and tournaments, especially like on the WCC channel. They cover a lot of the topping decks, and you can see how many people try out different kind of options for this deck and different techs and stuff. Mine is just one variant. There's so many other ways to build this deck, so get exploring, try a bunch of stuff out, and see how it works for you. But alright guys, that's gonna be it for me today. If you liked the video, please do give it a like, and of course share this video with your friends too if you know any Magnolia players at your locals or people that aren't sure how they want to build this deck. And also I would really appreciate you guys subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, as we're trying to reach that 50k. But otherwise, check out all the stuff in the description, my Twitter, Twitch, all that kind of stuff. Go check it out, give it a follow. But otherwise, that's gonna be it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.